Hi, my name is Marie Romagnano, founder of Healthcare Professionals for Divine Mercy. I'm so happy to present to you our educational conferences that integrate medicine, bioethics, and the spirituality of Divine Mercy in patient care for healthcare professionals. Because of their importance, even if you're not a medical professional, we invite you to join us. Today, I wish to offer a brief summary of a presentation by Father Benedict Groeschel on Divine Mercy and the New Positive Psychology. In this talk, the late beloved Father Benedict, founder of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, discusses the new psychology and the new direction the field has taken regarding the psychology of virtue. For nearly 100 years, the clinical study of psychology used a scientific approach that was in many ways anti-value and anti-spiritual. In the late 20th century, it was felt that a new approach was needed, and the question raised was, why do people get better just because they want to? For years, people in the field looked for reasons. People had neurosis, psychosis, and personality disorders, and most of these did not ameliorate with time. Even alcoholics realized that they will always be an alcoholic, but by the grace of God, they may be in remission. A medical doctor and later head of the American Psychiatric Association, Dr. Seligman, wrote a book on the psychology of virtue and stated that the field must integrate faith and virtue into intellectual teaching. What is a virtue? Father Groeschel states that it is a permanent or core characteristic of a person who is identified as a moral or deeply religious leader of the human race. Examples include Aristotle, Plato, the Apostle Paul, St. Augustine, and St. Thomas Aquinas. Seligman wrote that one would do better if they tried to develop virtues, and we know the theological virtues of prudence, Seligman called wisdom, justice, or being honest, caring for others, temperance, which is self-discipline, self-restraint, and fortitude, or courage. Father Groeschel noted that we cannot develop and have the virtues of faith, hope, and charity without God's grace. Father Benedict also discussed private revelation and saints associated with it, St. Bernadette, St. Margaret Mary, and St. Faustina, to name a few. An example of an approved apparition was that always spot on was St. Bernadette. She said initially, for instance, that she saw a lady who said that she was the Immaculate Conception. When asked if she saw Our Lady, she said, "No, I saw a beautiful woman who said she was the Immaculate Conception." St. Faustina saw our Lord and spoke of his mercy during a very vicious and cruel century. Father Benedict also discussed purgatory and the visions of St. Faustina, communism and the growth of the church in China, and noted that in 2011, over 400,000 Muslims converted to Christianity. He said that we are living in a very interesting time and reminded us that the foundation of Catholic teaching is go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. Matthew 28, verse 19. I invite you to listen to the remarkable presentation of the late Father Benedict as he discusses Divine Mercy and the New Positive Psychology. Thank you.
Folks, if you're having a trouble hearing me, you put up your hand. Some of you are hearing here, having trouble. Let me see if you have it hear me. Okay. If you can't hear me after a while, please put up a hand. And if you want me to quit, you put both hands. Some of you are aware that I just had a stroke about 3 weeks ago. So I'm struggling with some difficulties related to a stroke. I've been beat up for years by being having been hit by a car for 3 weeks. A stroke. And part of that cause of the stroke is that you lose some of your words. You pause for a word, or you can't quite find the word. So be a little bit patient and be aware that I am struggling with a stroke and some aphasia caused by the stroke. Seems to be getting gradually better, but that problem is here. Now, I listened to Dr. Thatcher today, and of course his talks are inspiring and beautiful talks of the Divine Mercy. I'm going to speak from a much more professional, almost like going to a class about something. Ordinarily I don't speak about this, but they asked me to speak about this subject. And it is the whole new psychology of virtue. What we left over at our table over there, I left a few copies of a book, of an article from First Things called Psychology and Recovery by Dr. Paul Vitz. It's First Things, March 2005. An extremely worthwhile article on the new psychology, and something that is very, very worthwhile. And as I was listening to Brian and knowing where the things are at with thoughtful people involved in medical work, I realized that you are very interested and perhaps right on the cutting edge of there is something of a revolution in the world of psychology, psychiatry, counseling. And that is what they call new psychology. And there's a fine review of that by Paul Vitz. But briefly, to give you this, for almost a century, the study of human psychology and clinical psychology and psychiatry. As a result of that, it was approached very much from a so-called scientific approach. And it was studying from a very anti-value, anti-spiritual approach, as you would tell from Sigmund Freud and others. Some people like Carl Gustav Jung tried to bring some of their own unusual understandings to the spiritual, but that was there. And as time was on, more humanistic psychology and came along. This was very much in the proper section, the vision, and we saw those of you years ago who were studying people like Carl Rogers and the whole movement of personal psychology and growth. But they never got beyond that. There was always a simple acceptation of a human being as a complex machine. Hardly anyone ever brought up something else. And it was really toward the end of the 19th and 20th century, a Jewish psychiatrist in Philadelphia, Dr. Aaron Beck, came up with the idea that we've been doing this for 50 years and we haven't done very much. We haven't been very successful. And let's start asking why people get better because they want to get better, and why they want not doing better well. And Dr. Beck brought really a whole approach. It's interesting and sad that the stupid Catholics in this field did not, for the most part, pick up the cognitive psychology of Aaron Beck. And right from there was the next group founded by another Jewish psychologist from Philadelphia, Dr. Martin Seligman, Seligman. Now you would think that the Catholics would have come out onto the sidewalks to cheer for Martin Seligman because he's talking about the psychology and psychotherapy of virtue. Virtue. They didn't even know what the word was. Nobody had used the word in years. But I'm sorry to say that a great many institutions that use the phony name of a Catholic college or university are not Catholic at all. I should mention while I'm here that my uncle is the youngest graduate ever of Holy Cross. When he was 19 years old. He was the youngest physician licensed in the state of New York at the age of 23, Dr. August Groeschel. And when he went to the cross, it was a Catholic school. It was a very Catholic school. Now, you don't get any kind of response from much of this. Seligman and his associates wrote and expected some kind of response by the religious, identified psychological world, but for the most part, the Catholics are terrified. Terrified? Yes, terrified. The possibility that they might actually be accused of being really Catholic. It's an old expression, most of you are too young to know, called shanty Irish. I'm half Irish, and I know what the word means, shanty Irish. It doesn't mean poor people. The Irish people would never, ever be mean in any way the poor people. Shanty Irish means new, rich Irish pretending to be Protestants or something else. Those of you who would be long ago remember the comics on Sunday morning, Maggie and Jigs. They were shanty Irish. And that's what goes on. And I have no hesitates at all about the pretense of people who are supposed to be believing Christians who do not integrate their faith and belief into their intellectual teaching and goings on. Well, thank God for a couple of Jews. And I want to show you the most expensive bit I ever bought in my life, $75. The only thing that was more expensive is the Gutenberg Bible. And this is a book by Dr. Martin Seligman and Christopher Peterson Character, Strengths, and Virtues, a handbook and classification on character and virtues. And Dr. Vitz brings the great of this together. What is a virtue? And Seligman is very clear. He uses it in a psychological sense. Virtues are permanent or core characteristics of individuals which are identified as the moral leaders and deeply religious people of the human race. Now, why does he use this? Because he's a psychologist and he's getting outside of theology. He's right. Seligman's book is not a theological book. It's not its purpose. Its purpose is to, in a positivistic way, what is virtue? That deeply religious people and deeply moral philosophers will say this. And then Seligman will give you a list. Aristotle, Plato, the Old Testament, the New Testament, especially the writings of St. Paul and the words of Jesus, St. Augustine, and at the top of the list by Martin Seligman is St. Thomas Aquinas. This is 180 turn. I was sitting there reading this book in the middle of the night, and I could not believe when I was finding that Martin Seligman was president of the American Psychological Association. And he is identifying virtues with people like St. Thomas Aquinas. Isn't that amazing? That's complete. And a very fine book has been put together by writings on Martin Seligman, The Science of Optimism and Hope, very worthwhile, published by Erdman's. And I have out at the table over there some copies of bibliographies of this talk. You might pick them up. Again, Paul Vitz's article in First Things in 203 will give you much of this information. Some of you are familiar with Paul Vitz's other book called Psychology as Religion, the cult of self-worship. And he does a great job on that as well. Paul is a very close friend of mine, a convert to the church, along with his wife and family. Now, let's take a look at what we're talking about. For many years in the field of psychiatry, psychology, psychotherapy, if you read it, everybody's looking for a reason. There's no unified theory at all in psychotherapy, or why are people sick? The best that you get for people with psychological diseases are the descriptions of abnormal psychology. And they're rather obvious: psychiatry, psychosis, neurosis, character disorder, the breakdown of all that. And they're rather obvious categories. But the question is always, why? And most of the severe psychological problems that people have do not, over a period of time, really ameliorate very well. People adjust. Psychotic people may become schizoid. Character disorder may join something like AA or NA or SA and pull themselves together, which is a very effective doing it. But they'll tell you they still have the problem. You get an AA member, he'll tell you, I'm not an ex-alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic who's trying to be sober. So there has really not been, for the most part, what people call cures. And when there would be psychological problems, they are called by neurological problems. They have had some kind of physical illness, and medication has been very, very effective for them. So in the whole world of psychiatry and psychology, there's been a much larger acceptance and enthusiasm for the use of medication. And for nothing else, the people who take the medication feel better, do better, and they may have to stay on the pill that they're on. But nobody's arguing with that right now. Martin Seligman brings up now the question of virtue. Can people, particularly people who do not have severe psychological problems, can they do better? Now, who am I talking about? Us folks. That's who we're talking about. The last two, totally sane, well put together people who ever lived with St. Joseph, and he was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. St. Joseph never had much to say about all this. An angel appeared to me and told me that St. Joseph talked to his mother, whose name was Sophie. And she went, and Joseph told her what was going to happen. And she sat there, the old Jewish lady, and she said, Joey, keep your mouth shut. Here we are. So, here we are, the whole crowd of us together. Most of us cheer ourselves up with the thought, we're mildly neurotic. How many people here think they're moderately neurotic? And some people think they're severely neurotic. And they may be. And so you're probably not a person called a character disorder because you wouldn't be here stealing things. You know, most of us don't have to worry about stealing the knives and forks and spoons from the place. And we neurotics, most of us have big tendencies toward depression. There was a study done by the World Health Organization on the number of people seriously depressed. And in Nigeria, it's 3%. And in the United States, it's well over 30%. And that's people that say, I'm really very depressed. So whatever it is, if you could move to Nigeria, a poor country with lots of problems and everything else, whatever else they're doing, you know. So we're a neurotic situation here. Now, Seligman and his disciples are saying will do better if we try to virtue. And he lays out the names of the virtues. Long ago, Plato had given the four major moral virtues: prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. If you went to Catholic school in the old days, you should have known that with justice, temperance, and fortitude. Now, Seligman changes the word prudence to wisdom. We would not, in Catholic language, we would use that because those are theological virtues or gifts of the Holy Spirit. So let's study with natural wisdom or prudence. Justice, being honest, giving people a right care of their needs. Prudence, justice. Temperance, everybody knows what that means. And courage. Interestingly, courage is not a strong virtue in the United States. This is not a widely practiced virtue. Most cultures do greatly admire brave people. The heroes of societies are heroes. People who have suffered, people who have fought the good fight. They're admired. This is not a strong recognition in the United States. The United States do not, the Americans do not like courageous people because they don't want to be disturbed in their own comfort. You don't see much sign for courage, even within the church. People don't speak out and say what they're honestly thinking about in the church. They mix things up. And it's an unfortunate thing. Also, Dr. Seligman and his associates associate two other virtues. That is humanity give me a second. I'm getting old. Humanity and transcendence. Now, these are natural virtues, but they reflect of the theological virtues. We believe in theological virtues are gifts of God. You cannot really come to faith, hope, and charity without the grace of God. Dr. Seligman and his associates are avoiding the idea of a theological virtue because they're trying to avoid writing a religious book. They're trying to rewrite a psychological book. But they would use two areas that certainly closely related to faith, hope, and charity. One of them being humanity, which is charity for other people, and the other are transcendence, interest in infinite and intangible realities like faith and hope. Now, this opens a whole new door to the understanding of human psychology, and it fits in very well with the thoughts of Christianity. But Seligman is not trying to do that wisely. I don't ask Seligman or Beck to come and show up the Catholics and the Protestants how to do this. That's not their job. But we ought to be ourselves aware of that. Could I ask you an honest question? In most of the institutions that for some ways or another identify themselves as Catholic institutions, are they strong on virtue? Do they talk about virtue? Do they point out virtue? Do they identify unvirtue behavior? Yeah. Now, I confess with no hesitation at all that for years I am a member of the board of directors of Franciscan University in Steubenville and the Ave Maria University in Florida. Purposely, after my stroke or after my accident, I resigned from one of those boards. Simply, I wasn't well enough. These are schools about virtue. They may not be by any means the hot stuff of the highest learning, of the best possible scientific learning, because they don't have the money. Done a big place for a lot of scientific examination and study and examination. You have to have a lot of money. Big money. But the question is, are you running a religious place to teach people to grow in virtue? The foundation of Catholic education. What is the foundation of Catholic education? It's the words of Christ himself. Going, teaching you all nations, baptizing me, being them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. I teach you the nations. The guide, the absolute rock of our education was a man who never had a formal education. He was an itinerant preacher in a poor country that was a subject country, Israel. And he is the teacher of the world. The great Catholic scholars of history, the great genius of Catholic and religious education and education in general are names of people who immediately fall to his feet. Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, Newman. These, in our own time, Joseph Ratzinger, very, very well academic, trained man. And we don't have to apologize for any place else. And to be quite honestly, I have many, many contacts and friends in the Jewish community. You know, in the Jewish community, education, study, learning is an extremely important thing in the Jewish community. Well, much larger, greater emphasis than other communities in this country. But you would never feel on the part of Jewish scholars any dimension of Christian education. And never in my life, with my friends, Jewish friends, have I ever heard the slightest diminishing of Christian education at all. But where do I hear it? Some of those windows, those signs up in front of the place, in the Catholic tradition. Like hell. Now, let's look at psychology, psychotherapy. As Seligman is pointing out, to discuss with patients what are virtues. And this is, Seligman uses the book, Character, Strengths, and Virtues. Character strengths are the things that make up virtues. So if you take a virtue like prudence or wisdom, first of all, it's thoughtful. A wise person is a thoughtful person. They think things out. They do not actively or make decisions quickly, jump there, improve. Not at all. They try with wisdom or with prudence to see their one idea is related to the other ideas in their whole situation. It should be integrated. You've all met people in your life who are very smart and demanding about one particular side of life, and they miss everything else. Very, very typical. They live this thing. And if you look through the outline of Witz's article, or you ever care to get the book by Seligman, very, very interesting, by a variety of psychologists who have studied along with him on the natures of virtue. Now, I won't ask you this, but I would ask you this. Seligman has been going for 10 years. Paul Witz wrote his article 7 or 8 years ago. How many Catholics have ever thought about psychotherapy and mental health because of virtue? Now, I've got a special kind of group of people here right now. I have a sample. This is not a genuine sample of Catholics calling them counselors or therapists. They're not at all. Very, very different. Why? Because among other things, you are based on a profound mystical teaching. Thank you very much. Great idea. You actually identified yourself with a mystic. Now, right there, that knocks out of a lot of people of the APA. They're not heavy into mystics. Most of them wouldn't have the slightest idea what a mystic was. And we are dealing with a regular, ordinary, predictable mystic. Catholic mystics come right out of the most common group of simple young women who have nothing else to tell anybody else, but I'm not trying to be famous. Like St. Faustina, St. Bernadette, unfortunately, because a child, told people, and she became well known. Many others, St. Margaret Mary, others like that. You don't know about those people until after their death. It'd be an interesting thing to know this. There are relatively few approved Vatican Revelation, private revelation. Yes. What would be an example? The most recent one would be Kubea in Rwanda, which back in the 1930s, there may be one in Latin America has Vatican approval. For the vast majority of private revelations, the person who is finally approved almost always is unknown, utterly unknown on the time of their death, and has not done anything to try to get any kind of public attention. When I hear about people around telling me that they're being taught about private revelations that they're telling me about, and they may be perfectly sincere people, the only thing I do with adult persons now living who speak about private revelations, I flee. I immediately leave. I don't want to get involved. And I wrote a book on private revelations, the church's teaching on private revelations, called A Still Small Voice, the Catholic teaching on private revelations. And I could tell you that that's very, very much what the church's way of doing things over the centuries. I cannot mention right now, in the last 300 years, a private revelation that was shown to an adult who was publicly known and approved by the Holy See. There are some that were approved by bishops, but they did not find with the Holy See. Now, you are people involved and interested, as I am, in a private revelation. Right out of the book. Right out of the Bible. First heard about St. Peter. Oh, here we go. This is a real one. Because nobody does it. She's a young woman, humble, simple, uninformed, and probably, as most people involved in private revelations, they themselves can make the adequate distinctions between what their own ideas and the revelation are. It's very, if you study private revelations, often people who had authentic private revelations and were accepted. Some of the things they said were not accepted. The worst of all cases, St. Catherine of Siena, told people that the Blessed Mother told her that she was not immaculately conceived. Watch that one. Don't ever lose that piece of information. Catherine of Siena was a Dominican, and the Dominicans at that time were opposed to the Immaculate Conception. It was a theory of Blessed John Scotus and St. Thomas, or the other later Dominicans, not St. Thomas, maintained that the universality of salvation was against the idea of Immaculate Conception. And what Scotus eventually taught and became a dogma was that the Blessed Mother was simultaneously created and redeemed at the same time. But that's an interesting one. If you want an example of a private revelation that never, ever made any mistakes, is Bernadette. Bernadette is the witness par excellence. because she said practically nothing. Whatever the Blessed told her, she said, and nothing else. She never got editorialized on the whole thing. In fact, for a long time, Bernadette was not willing to say that she had seen the Blessed Virgin. Did you know that about Bernadette? You saw the Blessed Virgin? No, I saw a lady who said she was the Immaculate Conception. Well, that is the Blessed Mother. I saw a lady who said she was the Immaculate Conception. Finally, Bernadette, gave in on that one. But she is the absolute. Now, if you look at some of the writings of Saint Faustina, particularly on her descriptions of hell, and the large numbers of people lost, and also the rather startling visions of purgatory. This would have been the basic acceptance of Catholics in her time, and especially Poland Catholicism was not exactly given to light, easy kind of going. But Poland Catholicism was tough. Poland was tough Catholicism. If you read the encyclical Spes Salvi by Pope Benedict, the last third of the encyclical, it's actually an encyclical of 3 encyclicals that piled up one after the other. The third part is about salvation, purgatory, which the Pope refers to as the intimate, what is he called? Intimate, not intimate, intermediate passage, is quite different than what we generally read, and a great deal of the writing about purgatory came in the 13th and 14th century. Not that people believed, the Catholics, the Orthodox, and the Jews believed that there was interim state from this life to the next life where you clean up your act if you haven't lost your eternal salvation. I don't know whether you know that, but that's what Jews believe. And the Jews pray for the dead. Did you know that? They pray for the dead. And the Orthodox, even all conservative Jews, pray on the anniversary of the death of their relatives. It's called a yard site. And they'll even lit little candles in the synagogue on the anniversary for that, for the dead. It comes right out of the Jewish idea. What's his name? Maccabees, yes. But that was before, long before Maccabees. Now, St. Faustina got kind of her description of purgatory is bright, dramatic, and that was the world she lived in. That's what people thought at that time. Older people here thought that way. If you were an old Catholic in the old way, you were worried about all sorts of people who were going to be lost, right? What about the Protestants? I used to pray for the Protestants all the time. Then I used to pray for the Jews. And I figured, gee, how are you going to do this one? The only thing you could do is, hope, what would you call the intention of baptism. If you read the Pope at the present time, it's quite different. In fact, you ought to read that. Very few people have read the encyclical Salvi Spe. Could I ask for close? How many people here read the encyclical Salvi Spe? Wow, all of 10. Now, in our understanding of the revelation of Saint Faustina, which is a proven Vatican approval throughout the Church. It is a very, very beautiful teaching. We could tell you this about private revelations. Catholic private revelations down through the centuries, particularly in the last 300 or 400 years, they are almost all revelations of mercy, of God's understanding, of the hope for the salvation of souls. St. Margaret Mary, with the devotion to the Sacred Heart, that magnificent devotion, that devotion was disapproved of for about 50 years. Did you know that? That Margaret Mary was very, very much attacked. The devotion to the Sacred Heart was called cardiolatry, the adoration of the heart. And particularly the Jansenists were very, very hostile to the whole idea of the Sacred Heart, because some people might get saved. And the Jansenists were hoping as very few would say it as possible. We have other devotions, private revelations. We have the apocalyptic revelation of Fatima. On the one side, there is apocalyptics there that could easily simply relate to the First World War and go on into the Second World War. The history of the human race in the 20th century has been an apocalyptic era. You think of it, the tremendous wars and economic problems. The first depression was 1906, the Great Depression of 1929, the continuation of the war, and the what they call the Cold War. The Cold War is only kind of coming down now because the Chinese have all become capitalists. You know, that's kind of a big laugh too. You know, I never believed the Chinese would become communists. Never. If you ever grew up in a neighborhood where there were Chinese people and there was a laundry and there were the Chinese kids, they absolutely loved their kids. They would do any sacrifice for their kids. And communism loses its family. It's one of the problems of communism. The family disappears. I said, they're never going to really be communists. And I believe it. Believe it. The church is growing very nicely in China right now. A friend of mine was recently in Shanghai at Christmas time, walking through this big store, this department store, blasting out in English and Chinese Christmas carols. Not jingle bell, but oh come all ye faithful. All over the place in English and Chinese. Stick around. Stick around. Never underestimate. Right at this particular point, at the end of my earthly situation, helping to get out of here soon. I'm doing everything possible. I was one of the last things I look over the end of the battlements of eternity. What's going to happen to the Muslims? Wouldn't it be interesting if the Muslims turned around Last year in the world, 400,000 Muslims became Christians. And I got to tell you this, that the United States, when it comes to the Muslims, they're saying a lot more of the non-Muslims are doing, right? They're saying their prayer. And, you know, you get the militant Muslims, but just see what you can do. The Pope is reaching up to the Muslims all over the place. And I don't ever give up your hope on that, okay? Now, St. Augustine, our state of divine mercy, of an utterly merciless, cruel, wicked, vicious century, the 20th century. And here we come at the other end of that century, to the 21st century. And there are places in the world where there are very serious trying times. Afghanistan, in Africa, particularly in Sudan, other places. But in fact, in generally, the world is a more peaceful place, isn't it? Isn't it? The most concerning thing I have is the fact that many believers, or claim to believe Christians, are absolutely blah. Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox. We're not doing very well, but the so-called mainstream Protestant churches are just falling away. The evangelical Protestant churches, mysteriously, unexpectedly, are becoming very friendly with Catholicism because of the pro-life position and belief in the divinity of Christ. There's a strong interest. If you go down the South, the evangelical Protestants are getting along with us much, much better. But so many people are just absolutely uninterested in spirituality or religion. And again, I say, this is observable even in what they call, for want of something else, higher Catholic education. Now, a last shot. The divinity of Christ. A few weeks ago, a large community of Catholic religious sisters in the average age of the 70s had their biannual get-together. And you know what they were talking about? The cosmic forces. The cosmic forces. The stuff that St. Paul took a shock as he was coming by. You know, they're studying about the weather, the thunder, the lightning, the clouds. And a number of them, because sisters were there and told me this, there was a demeaning of Christ. An open, direct demeaning of Christ. Watch out. Watch out. Can there be anything worse than the diminishing of Christ? Last summer, at Fordham, a scholar, not a Jesuit, gave a lecture there, and he told the gathered victims that Jesus did not know who he was. This guy's going to be back in the United States next summer, and I'm going to be on water. This is a denial of the New Testament. It's a denial of the Gospels. It's a denial of the ecumenical councils of the church. How can you be a divine person and not know who you are? First of all, the person who has made this statement shows a psychological ignoramus. Because children, human children, are said by the age of 6 weeks to know that they are human beings, that they can tell between themselves, other human beings, and other creatures around. It's done by the way they do it. They show a little baby, 6 weeks old, and they show him a face, and he smiles. Then they show him a picture or a face of a bear, and he screams. Unless they show him a teddy bear, which doesn't look like a bear at all. It's a human being sort of dressed up like a bear. That doesn't scare them. They're smart. But apparently, the Son of God did not know who he was. Such rot, what utterly nonsensical, undenying unbelief. And I was speaking the other night on my television show with an outstanding Jesuit theologian, Father Joseph Koterski, professor at Fordham. And Joe was our main speaker, the speaker in the evening, on the divinity of Christ. Did a beautiful, did any of you see that broadcast? Yeah. He did a very, very good job. And there's where the battle is. All of us can quietly live over in our corner, being consoled with divine mercy. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think we should tell it to the Protestants. By the way, you get the divine, divine mercy chaplet. You get the Protestants to say it. If you're picketing the abortion, they don't want to say the rosary. Get them to say the divine person. If the Protestants do it right, they'll love it. But the battle is Jesus Christ. In this unbelieving time, in this, if I may say, I hate to use it, shanty Irish, phony Catholicisms from the past. They're so smart. They're so smart that they're fools. Quite honestly, there are a number of people I have sent to secular universities rather than to a phony Catholic university. Some young men I know who go to Stanford University. They have 10 people working in the campus ministry. On the evening, on a Sunday evening, in the chapel of that university, Stanford University, there are 1,300 students on Sunday night at Mass, and the president is in the front row. I definitely believe that if something is not authentically, it's a lie. You know, I think my Jews all ought to be Jews. My Protestants ought to be Protestants, and if it should become Catholics, they should switch over, like my friend from Richard Newhouse. That's how we came. And I even, if I occasionally meet a sort of calm atheist, there aren't very many, they're also violent, but if you meet a nice, quiet atheist, I say, You know, be a halfway decent atheist. You know, would give us something to have a little disgust with. Unfortunately, you can't do this with atheists. They all become very angry, anti-religious people, like Dawkins and some of these other comedians that they have. Get me a decent atheist. I'd love to chat with these. But we ourselves, and if you certainly a devotee of divine mercy, you also be, above all other things, a faithful follower of our Lord Jesus Christ, and a witness to the world for him. God bless.